to our chat today, where we have put together a little tribute to Gibran, Khalil Gibran. We are commemorating the 91st anniversary of the passing of this remarkable Lebanese poet and painter. Khalil Gibran was born in 1883 and passed away in 1931, and he lived only 48 years. It has been 91 years since Gibran left us. We are nearing the centennial of the loss of such a significant poet, such an expressive figure in the history of humanity. Our dear Gibran, as everyone knows, was born in Lebanon and passed away in the United States. He reads behind a body of work that is partly written in his native language and partly in English. Today, especially, we honor him on the occasion of these 91 years. We will take a look at a book, which is the first he published in English. It is a book of stories called The Madman. The Madman was published in 1918, and it is the first work he published entirely in English, where a series of stories are woven together, all of them with very strong symbolic content. Altogether, in this book, The Madman, we have 26 short stories, some of them quite brief, all carrying significant symbolic content, and one thing that really impresses me. Those who know me are aware that here on the new Acropolis channel, I have had the chance to give lectures on each chapter of Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. I gave a dedicated lecture on Gibran's relationship with Mary Haskell, the great love of the Prophet, and I truly admire this author. What impresses me about this book, especially The Madman, is how he crafts stories with extraordinary perfection. He envisions extraordinary scenarios. Today, there is a skill in our era known as storytelling. Storytelling is exactly the skill of crafting stories that deliver very deep content. Gibran, long before this trend took off, was already a master storyteller because he knew how to craft stories with a moral foundation of remarkable beauty and a deeply profound moral lesson. And because of Gibran's character, the way he expressed himself, some were somewhat complex to understand. So, on this day, we come together to discuss a bit more, once again, about this remarkable man, Khalil Gibran. With this book, The Madman, in hand, I will share my thoughts on two of his stories, the first two. First, the one called The Madman, and the second called God. The plan is to quickly read this story to you, then go back through it piece by piece, commenting on what it means, what it indicates, and what it suggests. When I read The Prophet, I used to say that my goal was to take Gibran from 2D and transform him into 3D, meaning to make him more relatable, more human, more experiential. It is really tough for someone to read Gibran and not say, wow, how beautiful, but that does not mean they've truly understood. The way he expresses himself creates a poetic engagement, a beauty that is captivating, that it does not necessarily mean there is a true understanding of the message he is conveying with his words. So my proposal, loving Gibran as I do, is to blend philosophy with this poetic vision of Gibran's life. And with philosophy, to unlock the contents, to deepen the understanding of what he is proposing. Because Gibran does not create empty shells. Besides having a beautiful presentation, he packs a lot of substance into everything he says. He delivers a very clear message to humanity. This is really intriguing for us to explore and delve into a bit. So, first, let's dive into The Madman. It's pretty well known. This poem is making the rounds online, a prose poem like everything Gibran creates. But maybe they have not taken the time to break it down piece by piece. So, as I suggested, we're diving into Gibran's book The Madman from 1918, focusing on the first two stories. I will read the story. First, I will simply read. Then, we will go back and comment on it piece by piece. Welcome to our journey. Shall we get started? The Madman. You ask me how I went mad. It happened like this. One day, long before many gods were even born, I woke up from a really deep sleep and realized that all my masks had been stolen. Yes, the 7 masks that I had crafted myself and used throughout my 7 lives. I then ran through the streets without a mask, surrounded by people shouting, "Thieves! Thieves! Cursed! Cursed thieves!" Men and women laughed at me, and some locked themselves in their homes, scared of me. And when I got to the market square, a young man, who was standing on the roof of a house, shouted, pointing at me with his finger, "He is a madman." I lifted my eyes to see, and the sun bathed my bare face, and my soul was filled with a love for the sun. And from that moment on, I never wanted to wear masks again. Then I shouted, as if in a trance, "Blessed, blessed are the thieves who stole my masks." That is how I went mad and found a lot of freedom and security in my madness. The freedom of solitude and the safety of never being understood. For those who understand us make us slaves. But let me not take too much pride in my security. Even the thief behind bars is not free from running into another thief. Beautiful, is it not? It is a captivating story. Beautiful, but often, as we say, a bit enigmatic. What does it mean to awaken in that primordial time, when many of the gods hadn't been created yet, and realizing that their 7 masks had been stolen? So, should we break it down piece by piece and talk about it? Let's get started. You asked me how I went mad. It happened like this. One day, long before many gods had been born, I unexpectedly awoke from a deep sleep and noticed that all my masks had been stolen. It must be the most primordial thing in the universe, if we consider this cosmogony, this moment when the universe is born, is the act of wearing masks. Many traditions of the past, many philosophies, many Eastern traditions talk about the universe in the beginning as being one unified whole. And when the cycle of manifestation kicks off, it starts to divide. First, in spirit and matter, then spirit, matter, and form, the primordial triad. Then, the 4 elements, water, earth, air, and fire. Then, the 5 and so on, until we reach the decade again, and the 1 adds to the 0, bringing us back to the primordial unity. This decade that Pythagoras talks so much about, which tells the story of the universe. But look, this initial moment when unity ends and multiplicity begins is the first time we put on a mask. Ultimately, what are we? The unity. We all are faces, channels, moments of unity in the illusion of time and space. We are all an integral part of the one. We are the one itself. And when multiplicity arrives, we start to play roles. First, we are either spirit or matter. Then we are either spirit or matter or form. Then we are earth, water, air, or fire. And then we become Lucia, Luana, John, Joseph. We keep putting on masks. Every personality, every particularity, every division is a mask. When we often demand, we communicate to be respected, to be accepted for who we are. Is it important to do it? Yes, it is important. Inclusion is a great virtue, but it is also really important for us to understand that what we are at this moment are not just simply the. It is one mask among many. We must respect all the masks, that we must also strive to discover our true face, which lies behind the mask. If you look at universal traditions, I do not know of any exceptions. If we take the entire Indian system, if we consider Plato's own allegory of the cave, with its dream of liberation and moving towards the light, if we consider the system of the Egyptian Kybalion and so on, we will always find a path back to unity. In other words, evolution is a process of taking off the masks. It is like if you imagined, I have given this example before in various lectures, you must remember that we are on the edge of a beach, on the sand, and we make a groove in the sand, and then another groove. We can say we have 2 grooves, or we can say we have sand momentarily differentiated. Soon, the wind blows, and everything becomes what it always was, just sand. The grooves are a superficial impression. Our freedom and impression, a mask that time quickly takes away, swiftly carried off by the winds of life. In other words, we can stand up for the role we're playing and the role of others, defending the right and respect for all masks. But what we cannot forget is what we truly are behind all the masks. We are unity. This is important to understand. He says that one day, before many gods were created, in other words, no. In a primordial time, he finally woke up and realized that his masks had been stolen. This means he overcame something known as the heresy of separateness. For those familiar with Helena Blavatsky's The Voice of the Silence, she references a Tibetan tradition that says the greatest evil in the world is the heresy of separateness. Very similar to what we today call selfishness. In other words, there's an imaginary line that separates me from you. And it says that what happens to you has nothing to do with what happens to me. Therefore, your loss can be a gain for me. Your suffering can be joy for me. Your pain can be fulfillment for me. From this, violence is born. From this, all sorts of dishonesty, corruption, and deceit of one person by another are born. From this arises all the evil that plagues humanity. And well, also notice that the whole journey towards enlightenment, it being Satora, whether it is samadhi or something else, the entire journey of enlightenment involves erasing this line, this imaginary dividing line, and rediscovering unity. So, he says, in a very ancient time, he wakes up and suddenly realizes his masks have been stolen, taken from him. For some reason, that was the moment of awakening. And he will keep on saying, yes, the 7 masks that I had crafted and used throughout my 7 miles. 7 is a highly symbolic number. Various traditions talk about the recurrence of the number 7 in nature. In the 7 colors of the rainbow, in the 7 musical notes, in the 7 openings of our head. The number 7 is always linked to something sacred. It symbolizes a full cycle of evolution. In India, 7 represents the vehicles of the human being, the quaternary and the triad. 7 is a number that signifies he has completed a full cycle. In other words, over the span of 7 miles, which is symbolic, no one can truly say how many experiences he went through or what. And 7 represents that he has completed a cycle. After going through all these experiences, he realizes, he awakens, and those masks he had gathered, all those specific traits. I am so-and-so, I don't like so-and-so. I deny this, accept that, prefer this, reject that. All those fantasies and illusions disappeared. And only the experience he gained through them remained. The experience that brought him to the understanding of unity. Then, suddenly, he awakens and the masks vanish. The masks were stolen, in quotes. The masks were overcome. The time has come to move past them. Who took them? Who were the thieves that took the masks? The Dharma, the law of the universe, the law of necessity, because he no longer needed them. Therefore, it removed the masks so that he could finally earn the right to see his true self. And he awakens, feeling insecure, afraid, and furious at not finding those things he identified with. Which is the next passage. I ran through the streets without masks, surrounded by people, shouting, thieves. Thieves, curse thieves. In other words, it is like picturing yourself feeling exposed. Always viewing the world from behind masks, masks, masks. Suddenly you wake up and you are exposed. It is like missing the prison because it kept you safe. It is like missing that mask because it shielded your face. It did not protect. In truth, it isolated your face from the world. It isolated your face from the light, from the truth. But when we lose them, for us, it is a reality check. This reality check, often mentioned in various traditions, is what someone goes through when they attain wisdom. One thing is seeking wisdom, being a philosopher. Another is to be a sophos, wise. He always experiences this reality check, this kind of initial insecurity, until gets used to living in another world where things are clearer. Bear Morley said, where the wings of passions cannot reach. Then he gets scared and runs through the streets, longing for that illusion that, for so long, kept him safe. And we indeed generally curse these so-called adversities that take away our masks as if they were our enemies. When we go through a tough situation that makes us mature, makes us grow, we become a true and better human being. Until we realize that it ripped away one of our masks, which helped us grow and mature, we despise it and curse the thieves of our mask. The illusion we had of being something we're not, an event in life comes along and hits hard, stripping away that illusion. You hate it, curse these. And then, at some point, you feel that a weight has been lifted from your face, a weight has been lifted from your life. But until you understand this, you curse the thieves, the events, the adversities that have taken a mask from your face. And this happens not only when we reach wisdom, but also in our everyday lives. Any event that's tough enough to rip the mask from us, sometimes it tears it off so forcefully that it takes the skin with it. Tears a mask from us, we hate it, we feel like victims, we feel wronged, and until we pull ourselves together and realize that now you are freer. That now is more mature, that now is on another level of consciousness. Until that moment, the feeling is one of rebellion and, sometimes, despair and, sometimes, vulnerability. That is exactly what he is describing here. Continuing, he will say, men and women laughed at me. Some shut themselves in their homes, afraid of me. See how interesting it is? People laugh. They shut themselves in their homes. Every time someone shows up who is different from their world, from their values. There is a book by a modern writer named Steven Pressfield, which I did lecture about. A lecture called How to Overcome Your Internal Limits. And in this book, at a certain point, Steven Pressfield says, there is a tacit agreement to keep us all submerged in mediocrity together. When someone awakens, they are seen as a traitor. Because someone who awakens exposes everyone else, showing that they could have reacted. In other words, when someone stands out from a crowd that is completely alienated, conformed, clinging to their masks, when someone tears off the mask, when someone awakens, they are either ridiculed or attacked, and one must be prepared for this. Why? Imagine, if you will, an example I always share, which I find interesting. It is quite enlightening. That moment when we were kids, and no one had studied for the test, but we did and got a good grade. And our classmates get furious. Know why? If no one had gotten a good grade, the blame would have been on the teacher. But since we got a good grade, we exposed the whole class and showed that it was possible for everyone to do well, that what happened was complacency. A person who reacts and tears off their mask is bothersome, and the one who bothers will either be ridiculed or attacked. So, at a certain point, we must learn to face this rejection, this ridicule, this exclusion from the group, this isolation, until we find ourselves in that place where those who have also torn off their masks come to meet. The great pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus used to say that those who sleep return to their own private worlds. That those who are awake share a common world. It is precisely in this world of those who are awake that you will find those who dared to tear off their masks, those whose masks were taken away. And then, in that world, you recognize yourself and you recognize each other mutually. So, it is interesting to realize that this loneliness of rejection is temporary. We will quickly find those who have also torn off their masks and who share a common world, all those who are awake. But there is this loneliness and immediate rejection from those who have torn off their masks. And that is what he feels here. Everyone laughed at me, everyone pointed at me, everyone laughed at me, because now I no longer wore masks. I was a stranger. And this stranger tends to be rejected. In a society where everyone has to be the same, think the same, and live the same. The one who achieves the authenticity of a face without a mask tends to be rejected. And when I arrived at the market square, a young man standing on the roof of the house shouted, pointing his finger at me, "He is a madman." I lifted my eyes to see. The sun bathed my exposed face, and my soul was filled like a love for the sun. And since then, I never wanted to wear masks again. In other words, at that moment, he lifts his face to respond to a noise, a sound that makes him look up. He looks up, in other words, he looks towards the realm of values, of virtues, towards what is most subtle. While he is only looking at the concrete world, he is rejected for no longer wearing a mask, for not being like everyone else. But when he looks up, he realizes that now there is light. And light symbolizes wisdom, light symbolizes values. The light now touches his face. The light, and here like one, he merges with the light. And this perception of the light makes him fall in love with it. Light is always a metaphor for wisdom, while ignorance is always associated with obscurity, with darkness. Then he feels the light on his face. He falls in love with the light, and he no longer wants anything to do with masks. Now he feels the sunlight, he feels the wisdom. And now this is his world, the world of those who no longer wear masks. Continuing, he will say, "Then I shouted as if in a trance. Blessed, blessed are the thieves who stole my masks." This is that moment when we reflect on the past, and then we recall a hardship and says, "When I went through it, it was painful, but today I know I would not be who I am if it weren't for it." Blessed is the hardship that made me who I am. Otherwise, I would be repeating myself, even today, living through that same experience. Blessed is the hardship that elevated me to who I am. So, at that moment, he enters a state of grace. Blessed are the thieves who stole my masks, where he realizes that he has overcome the illusions that, in fact, what he called thieves. It was the laws of life. It was the benevolent hand of Dharma which took away everything that weighed him down, that kept him from his righteous path. And he enters, then, into a state of ecstasy and gratitude for the laws of life. That allowed him to reach this direct vision of the light, where he recognizes himself as part of the light. And he will continue speaking, "That is how I became mad, and I found much freedom and security in my madness." The freedom of solitude and the security of never being understood, for those who truly understand us, make us slaves. See how interesting this is. In a world governed by a mechanistic, superficial reason tied to the mundane that confines human beings to an ordinary life. Every time you are understood, it means you have been labeled, you have been boxed in. Those who escape this world of mechanization, this world of masks, are not understood. At least not for a trivial reason. For this practical reason, for this reason that frames the human being into pre-existing models and forces them to repeat themselves endlessly. Not for a reason that homogenizes. Therefore, I will never be understood. Not by this world. Because every time they understand something, they label it, frame it, fit it, box it in. And you no longer have any freedom. Therefore, he found the security of being outside the world's understanding, which limits everything it comprehends. It clips the winds of things and frames them into ready-made categories. He will continue speaking, "But do not let me become too proud of my security." Not even the imprisoned thief is free from encountering another thief. In other words, this does not mean that the moment when the sun bathed my face and I felt like part of the sun at a certain moment, this same stage of consciousness should not be surpassed by another, even greater one. Perhaps this, which at this moment is the ultimate freedom for me. In the natural process of growth, it becomes another mask, which nature will also come to remove. Until we reach unity, many masks will fall along the way. This step we have just climbed. It seems to us that the air is thinner, offering a much broader view of reality. It feels like the pinnacle, but it is not yet. And once we have become accustomed to this step and have captured all the beauty and vision that this step offers, the time to grow comes again. Then the thieves come and steal yet another one of our masks. In other words, be careful. Never regret the final point. We had a moment where the merit of our quest, of our journey, and a touch of light. It touched our face. But the journey always continues. Beware of the vanity of those who think they have already arrived, who believe they possess some truth, who claim ownership of something. What we have is a continuous movement, always a unity. And this is the first story, The Fool. second story is called God. It is a very beautiful vision of a human being attempting to meet God 4 times. He will describe this quest for that encounter. Once again, I will read the story and then we will go back and work through each point of it. In ancient times, when the first stirrings of speech indeed reached my lips, I climbed the sacred mountain and truly spoke to God, saying, Master, I am undoubtedly your servant. Your hidden woe is my law, and I will obey you forever. But God did not answer, and like a mighty storm it passed. And after 1,000 years, I climbed the sacred mountain. And again I spoke to God, saying, Creator, I enter creation. From clay you molded me, and to you I owe everything that is mine. And God did not answer, but like 1,000 swift wings, it passed. And after 1,000 years, I climbed the sacred mountain and spoke to God again, saying, Father, I am your child. With mercy and love, you gave me light, and through love and worship, I shall inherit your kingdom. And God did not answer. And like the mist that covers the distant hills, it passed. And after 1,000 years, I climbed the sacred mountain and once again spoke to God, saying, My God, my goal and my fulfillment, I am your yesterday and you are my tomorrow. I am your root in the earth and you are my flower in the sky. And together we will grow before the face of the sun. Then God leaned over me and whispered in my ear sweet words. And just like the sea that embraces a stream flowing into it, he enveloped me. And when I descended to the valleys and plains, God was there too. Beautiful, truly beautiful. Even if we grasp it without much reflection, we realize there's not something much deeper here. It signifies a person climbing this sacred mountain, reaching the highest point of their consciousness, where he has achieved so much already and is trying to get closer to this mystery, which is God. In every moment of his life, represented by this passage of 1,000 years, it signifies a journey from one point to another, climbing the sacred mountain, reaching the highest and most noble point our consciousness has achieved, and attempting to make contact with God. And with the best tools we have, and God passing by. But the way he passes, he leaves a message for us. Shall we go through each point of this poem? See how beautiful and intriguing it is. In ancient times, when the first stirrings of speech came to my lips, I climbed the sacred mountain. And I spoke to God, saying, Master, I am your servant, your hidden will is my law, and I will obey you in all things, always. But God did not respond, and like a mighty storm, he passed. In other words, at the highest point of my consciousness, I realized that there is a being who is God. It is like imagining in the history of humanity that moment when people place one stone upon another, and these symbolically represent something greater than themselves, something metaphysical that they sense in nature, and they turn it into a form of worship. But God is there, and I am here. There's a certain feeling of fear towards this God and a sense of smallness, as if we were mere slaves, small, insignificant beings, devoid of any value in the face of the greatness of this God. This is the best we have at this moment, and already is quite a lot, is a being who is on the brink of the metaphysical, who has started to go beyond their purely practical mind, and began to position themselves at the brink of the metaphysical. It develops a perception of a broader mind. In India, it is called manas, pure mind, or briddhi, which is an intuitive vision. It starts to perceive not only the physical, but also the metaphysical. But it is a vision where he still feels wretched, and the vision of God is still cloaked in fear. And God departs like a storm. Many storms are yet to come. Many pains, many sufferings, many crises, many adversities, until consciousness can, by overcoming them, to try and higher step. That is exactly what will happen. After enduring many storms foretold by God, humanity returns 1,000 years later to assume the sacred mountain. And after 1,000 years, I climbed the sacred mountain. And again I spoke to God, saying, Creator, I am your creation, molded from clay, and to you I owe everything that is mine. And God did not answer, but like 1,000 swift wings, he passed by. In other words, initially, God is there and I am here. And I feel small, insignificant, and I feel him. In a second moment, God is there and I am here. But beyond fear, now I have gratitude. I recognize that, even in my smallness, there is beauty within me. There is nobility within me. There is something of great value within me, and I already recognize this level of value within myself. And when I see value in myself, I feel grateful because I cannot express gratitude for nothing. When a man discovers within himself a heart, values, virtues, wisdom, or the potential for them, when he uncovers this dignity, he starts to explore within himself and realizes there is something precious inside. Then he feels like he is the keeper of a treasure. And then he stands before God once more. God is there and he is here. But now he is already grateful. He is no longer a wretched being. He is a being who has something to be thankful for. It is a second moment. And God passes by like the beating of wings. It means there is still a need to take flight. We're in a good place now. You started to become aware of yourself. It is not entirely turned outward. Now you've turned inward a bit. You are starting to perceive yourself. But there is still a need to elevate consciousness, to flap wings. And after 1,000 years, this man returns once more. And after 1,000 years, I climbed the sacred mountain and spoke to God again, saying, Father, I am your child. With mercy and love, you gave me the light, which, through love and worship, I will inherit your kingdom. God did not respond. And like the mist that covers the distant hills, he passed by. Notice how that it is interesting. In the first moment, God is there and I am here. A wretched, despicable, tiny being, I place myself before him like a slave. He is there, I am here, and I am an insignificant being. In the second moment, God is there and I am here. But now I already have something significant. And this something significant places me before him with gratitude. In this third moment, I am the child. And then God is there, but also here. Because many of the Father's characteristics are in the child. And you start to realize the potential of God within you. If God has power, then I have it too. In my own measure and within my possibilities, which can be expanded. If God has love, I have it too because I am the child. Therefore, those who pass by me can say, he is the spitting image of his Father, he has his Father's features. Therefore, I find God's attributes within myself. And I realize that by developing these attributes within myself, I draw closer and closer to God. It is a moral stage. It is a stage of search for values where a person realizes their great mission. It is the development of God's attributes that exist within him. Now he knows that he is the child. But still, what do you see? A mist that covers the distant hills. In other words, the highest point of the distant hills is still shrouded in mist. The highest you haven't seen yet. These are the mysteries. The peak of the hills, higher and farther away. You have not seen it yet. There is still a final point to this mystery. He keeps walking and comes back before God. And after 1,000 years, I climbed the sacred mountain and once again spoke to God, saying, My God, my goal and my fulfillment. I am your yesterday and you are my tomorrow. I am your root on earth and you are my flower in the sky. And together we grow before the face of the sun. Then God leaned over me, and in my ears he whispered words of sweetness. And just like the sea that embraces a stream flowing into it, he embraced me. And when I descended to the valleys and plains, God was there too. In other words, 1,000 years later, elevating his consciousness to the highest level, he now reaches those hills, which are no longer covered by mist. Now he can see. In other words, at first, God was there, and I was here, and I feared him. In the second moment, God was there and I was here, and I was grateful. In the third moment, God was there and was here, and I recognized him in me. And in this fourth moment, there is no there or here. God and I are one. And he is with me in everything. I am an episode of God in time and space. When I descend to the plains, God is there too. Because simply, my voice is the voice of God. My will is the will of God. Through me, unity acts upon the world. My desires are nothing more than the divine will. My thought, my presence in the world is simply a channel through which the one manifests at a crossroads of space and time. And where I am, God is. Because there is no more separation, all separateness has been overcome. And there is no more there or here. God and I are one. And this is the ultimate process, which is the attainment of unity. The ultimate process that all quests from the East and the West, the medieval mysticism, the mysticism of the most remote Indian schools, the mysticism of the schools, Zen, from the four corners of the world, seek this fusion in such a way that man realizes he has always been, he and God, one and the same. And when he clears away all the fog of ignorance, all the fog of separateness, it is God who acts through him. And God is wherever he is. And this is a poetic, wonderful vision that shows the extinction of differentiation, the moment when we achieve the light. Gibran manages to convey, through a poem, a poetic suggestion, one of humanity's most timeless and complex quests, the moment when separateness will be definitively overcome. Marguerite Parit, who writes a wonderful book, The Mirror of Simple and Annihilated Souls. This is the moment when the separated souls are annihilated. Separateness is annihilated, and here we are one. And wherever I am, whether on the highest peaks, in the plains, in the mountains, or in the valleys, where I am, God is, because God and I are one. And there is no longer there nor here. Therefore, it is a wonderful piece. That shows the level of this great poet, who is Khalil Gibran. It is worth an excellent reflection. I share this with you so you can learn a bit more. Why do I admire Gibran so much? Why does a philosopher admire Gibran so much? Because his spirit of combining the beauty of form with deeply philosophical content is rare in history. Often, one knows how to polish the form, making it very perfect. There is an auras, but there is not much to say. Often, there is wonderful content, but the form is sometimes a bit rough. He unites wonderful content with perfect form. That is why what he presents is timeless. Hence our gratitude for the special being who gave us such beautiful things. Thank you so much.